So we are doing a social justice project for our arts marketing class. And as that project, we are looking at why there's gender disparity among conductors, especially in top orchestras in the United States.
Yeah.
So what we found was that of approximately 800 orchestras in the United States, 80% are led by male conductors and 20%. But if you start going to more top tier orchestras, the disparity widens.
Right.
And then in the United States, there's only one, of course, it's Marin Alsop of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. So we wanted to ask you why you think that might be so.
Well, I can pretty much, or make a really good guess, having been a conducting student in Europe, because it's traditionally it was all men. I mean, when I was in Salzburg, even the Berlin Philharmonic was still all men. And I think the Vienna Philharmonic was as well. So the orchestras also had that tradition. Now the women have broken into all of those orchestras, but it's been more difficult for women to break into conducting, just because it was by tradition a male.
So when you say all men, do you mean the orchestras themselves were all men?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And prided themselves on the fact that they were all men.
Were all male.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think one of the first sort of wake-up moments, it might have been the Vienna Philharmonic, because they started accepting women before Berlin did. They had auditions where the players were behind a screen. And so they didn't know if they were male or female, and they picked the better players, and sometimes they happened to be women instead of men.
To some point, it's partly just a generational thing. It takes time for that to change, in the same way that, this conversation happened about black head coaches in the NFL. For a while, there were a lot of assistant coaches, even a majority of the assistant coaches in the NFL were black, but very few head coaches. And then as they had more experience, that number started to change naturally. So to some extent, I think that might be an answer.
So it's just taking time.
It does take time. I didn't know the statistics on graduate students. I was going to say that. Yeah. My expectation would be that probably pretty close to half of people getting advanced degrees are women. In my studies, half of my classmates were women, half of my teachers were women. So, I had one mentor in master's degree and one in a doctorate.
So when my first job was to get an orchestra job, and I spent some time in Brazil, came up here and started auditioning, and I found that they were anxious to have women in the orchestra.
Really?
I was very surprised because, I don't know whether it was the timing or whether it was that they just couldn't ignore the fact that I played very well, because I used to in those days very, very well. But I looked at it as almost like an advantage. So when I joined the orchestras, both in Brazil and in Florida, and then doing a lot of freelancing up here, I was very surprised at the fact that I was never really turned down. I was always, and I always looked at it as based on ability. The fact that I worked very, very hard, and that I was prepared, and that I was professional, conscientious, all those things. And maybe, some of the people didn't get the same impression that I did, but I never felt as though I was, being judged because I was a woman differently.
also, we have a quote here. She said, even for those able to make the career work, there have been complications, like how they conduct their physical models.
Yep.
So she said, when men make forceful gestures, they come off as being masculine and violent. Sometimes when women do that, they're interpreted as being pushy and bossy.
Mm-hmm.
She said she's really worked hard at trying to degenderize gestures. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is. I think there's truth to that. We see it in the political campaign. I think the concept of women in leadership is still problematic for many people. My sense is it's more problematic for people that are older. And when we look at American orchestras, that's what we're talking about. That's where the money comes from, is older Americans that may have less comfort with that. I've worked with Marin Alsop a little bit. I don't know her well, but I know the musicians that work with her. They think of her as a conductor and what she brings to them musically in the same way that anybody else brings to them musically, and I think they esteem her really, really highly, because she's really damn good.
I think we just have to be a little more open-minded about it, to give women a chance if they so choose to do that. But again, I don't know how you spark that interest.
The underlying interest. Well, for you, it
Yeah.
took a comment. You're good at this.
Yeah.
You should consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I do remember growing up being fascinated watching Sarah Caldwell conduct the operas. They would have them occasionally on TV, and Leonard Bernstein, and all of that. And it never occurred to me that wasn't a possibility for me if I wanted to do that.
It's still a pretty small percentage that are women. It's a larger percentage in colleges, but it's only still probably 20% of the jobs, where it's 50% of the grad students.
Mm-hmm.
I bet if we had this conversation in 20 years, it'll be 40%.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be even, but it's interesting to watch it change. Militaries, not one of the military bands has had a commander that is a woman yet. They have kind of assistant commanders, so in 20 years, I bet that'll be different.